Hello, hello. Let's wait 2 more minutes until this sends proper notifications. By the way, if someone could write if you can hear me, that would be awesome. We'll also do the test if... Oh, yeah. Hi, Jar. Thanks for coming. Okay, that's great. I had some issues with my camera today. It kept disconnecting. Now I connected it directly to my MacBook, so I hope it will be okay. Hello, hey guys. Okay, let's wait 1 more minute and I'll start. Hej Zuzia, hej Marlena, hej Krzysiek, hej Maciej. All right, so I hope that you know that you're on the 10 Lessons from Arkency for 2025 webinar. And let's start right away. And first of all, I want to start with disclaimer. I'll be discussing things that we as Arkency use on a daily basis and things that work for us. So it's okay to disagree. And let's start with a question. Is Ruby on Rails still a good choice for 2025? And I want to start with a story, but we'll keep this question in mind and we'll fully answer it at the end of this presentation. So the story and the moment where I really started loving Ruby on Rails is when we were working for one of the clients that really very early adopted the Hotwire. So we were kind of early to the Hotwire game, and it worked really fine until they wanted to start building quite a complex feature. And there was a discussion regarding if we should continue with the Hotwire or maybe we should just go off the road and start using React. Customer was a little bit reluctant, but hey, we understand that, right? They have to put their money on the table so we can check our assumptions. But what we did, we asked for some time box to do a POC. And we did this POC by, just quickly implementing not production ready solution of what we wanted to achieve. And the feature was quite complex because it was an Excel-like table in the web browser, which had multiple functions. For example, when you clicked once on the cell or double or 3 times, it had to behave differently. And then at the end, we decided to go with Hotwire. And by the way, I regret nothing till today. And for me, it's a really big game changer, because if you think about this, what we used to do and what I used to do in my previous life, which will get clear in just a moment, we used to build 2 applications instead of 1. Now the slide says that we have 1 application instead of 2, because we don't have to, if we follow the Hotwire path, we don't have to run the React.js separate client that manages the UI and manages all the states. Usually what I used to do myself as well was to deploy those 2 applications separately. So there was React UI application that communicated via some API through HTTP. That was a nightmare because, well, you want to do 1 small feature and you have to basically do it in 2 places. So for me, discovering and learning this Hotwire path, it gives me a lot of joy, but it also gives me a speed of delivering new features. But to my surprise, it's really good when it comes to testability, because, well, all you have to do, you don't have to write those JavaScript tests, because if you design it well, there are no JavaScript, almost. We had some in that very complex feature case, but normally you don't really need it. And Hotwire feels more than enough when you think about building typical business application. If you think about something like Miro.com, you may need to think about this and do some spikes or POCs. And basically, if you overslept on React on Rails, then that's really awesome thing that I love that we discovered during recording our YouTube videos with Tomek, that all you have to do is to do some upgrade and you will have, in most of the cases, this spa-like experience, right? So Ruby on Rails is awesome in that way that it lets you leverage this development speed by learning and using Hotwire. However, people say if you just go over the internet, you talk with different people, and then when I tell them that I work in Rails now, they're like, oh, dude, isn't that thing slow? I mean, it's good for the start, but later on, after the startup phase, it gets much slower, right? There is this perception in the market. And what can we do about this perception? Well, I'll try to show you a couple of techniques today in forms of 10 lessons, which can change the way that hopefully at least you perceive the Rails, but also how you can talk to your friends, or basically maybe we can change this picture in a couple of years. Okay, but let me introduce myself. My name is Łukasz Reszke, and now why I used to say that, well, when I switched to Rails, because I used to work as .NET developer for, I think, almost 7 years. But there is no way back for me now, because I don't look back. That was really good time, but now I found my sweet spot, and I work in Arkency and obviously with Ruby on Rails right now. And I'm software engineer, consultant, and also trainer. And DDD and events are my bread and butter. I'm really a big fan of those topics and use them in daily basis. And to your surprise, I hope that you will learn that DDD is not only about introducing the aggregates. And also, I'm a big TDD fan, so let's start with discussing tests in Ruby on Rails. And if you are that person, yes, there will be recording. If you are that person that you run your tests and then you go and scroll the social media and that's your default that you do, then I suggest that we discuss and work on your test suite that you have. And the question that I would ask is, why is this test suite so slow? And there may be many reasons for that, but one of the questions, let's just keep digging a little bit deeper, is that, are you in the end-to-end tests team? Because if you are, then hey, in May this year, 2024, even the HH himself admit that, well, the system tests have failed and they are dead. And he said that, well, he wrote that system tests, they are slow, brittle, and full of false negatives as they did a decade ago. So nothing really improved in this area. So we need to find a better way. And if you look a little bit outside of Rails, although probably to some of you, this approach, this pattern may be known. If you look outside of Rails, there is such a thing as testing pyramid, described by Martin Fowler. And as you can see, it has 3 levels, right? But basically we could put many more levels depending on where you come from and what test you believe that the application should have. But what we have here is that we have those UI tests, which are considered the end-to-end test. And if you look at this right side of this graph, you can see that, well, the axis on the right is showing $3, which means that it's quite expensive to write the UI test. And that's pretty much aligned with what DHH is saying. But on the left-hand side, you can see that, well, there is a turtle, which means that it is quite slow. But what does it mean that it is slow? Well, it means that, first of all, that's my interpretation, the tests are running very long to, well, check what they need to check. But also writing them, besides taking money, also takes a lot of time. And often it's the return of investment it's not really high, right? If we go down this pyramid, we will see the service. You could distinguish the controller level in here, and the controller level tests are quite fine. I mean, unless you use RSpec, because then there is some different things. I'm not really a big fan of it. But if we just think about, communicating with the Rails controllers via HTTP and then reading the response, maybe checking what's in the database, those tests are way better than the UI tests because, well, they are less brittle, although sometimes they are still brittle. And well, but they bring a good amount of value for the price. However, my favorite type of test is to do unit tests, right? We'll get to that in a couple of seconds, but yes. So what I just want to admit to highlight that this testing pyramid post is from 2012, so it's quite old knowledge. It's nothing like it's not a discovery from last year. It is just something that you can use and that is well battle tested. But okay, so I'll tell you how I do structure my tests. So I mostly use three types of tests. I use acceptance tests to validate that feature works correctly according to the specification that there is from business or that we work out together with business. And what I do, I move these edge cases down into the unit tests. And in my mind, unit test is not just a single class. Unit test is unit of behavior, right? But what is important for me is that there is no external dependencies in this unit class. It is just plain old Ruby class. And the advantage that I see of this test over the end-to-end test, but also over the controller test, is that if the class is structured well, then I don't need to seed entire system, prepare user, correct authority, other resources just to test one small thing, right? And in my experience, it's easiest to max out the code coverage in here if you have complex if statements, right? And we know that sometimes the if statements are more complex in some parts of the system than in the other, right? So if you have any high complexity in the system, try to push it down to unit tests. It can be either class, but also functions are welcome here. And the last type of test I use very frequently is regression tests. So whenever I start working with some bug, I mean, I'm assigned to a bug or I just take the bug from the backlog, first thing that I like to do to make sure that I understand this bug, I write a test, and then when I see this test is red, and then I validate what's going on and I fix the issue. I would like to see this test turning green, right? Because then and only then I have the certainty that, well, I did fix the right thing, right? And not only the wrong assumption. And what's really cool about this approach is that it will not come back. So the lesson number one is make your test suite fast and learn how to write tests effectively, right? And to do that, remember there is well-known battle-tested thing such as testing pyramid that you can use to learn how to structure your tests properly. All right, but someone may say, hey, Łukasz, I can't do that because I have a callbacks that disturb my unit test, and it's not really unit, right? Because there are external dependencies, so it doesn't work. It's not that easy. I have to mock it. I have to stub it. It's hell. It's not fast. I cannot write tests fast. And what I see that in Rails, there is this love-hate relationship with callbacks. Some people love them, obviously. For example, if you roast callbacks on Twitter, then people will roast you. But as you can see, for example, here, that's the Reddit from 3 months ago. As I was preparing for this presentation, I found that one guy was asking, what's the biggest pain point in large Rails application? And obviously, one of the posts or one of the answers was that, well, those are callbacks, right? And when you talk to people, when you look over different sources, people really hate callbacks. Some of them obviously love them, but it seems like this is a thing that is overused and that is often not used correctly. So what's up with the callbacks? Okay, so I'll tell you what is my stance on the callbacks, what I think about them. And are they good or are they bad? Let's think about this. So when you are in this startup mode or you need to develop something fast, callbacks may actually speed you up, right? If you think that there is, after every state change of the object, something needs to happen, well, then it's an easy way to achieve that, right? If you start adding, building on top of it, like sending emails, communicating via third party, Well, it may bring you down because at certain point, those callbacks may become really hard to manage. But let's think about this for one more moment. So what do the callbacks solve? And if we look at the definition, so I'll look at the other screen because this one is too small. During the normal operation of Rails application, objects can be created, updated, and destroyed. That's a crude approach, right? Active records provide hooks into this object lifecycle so that you can control your application and its data. And it goes on. Callbacks allow you to trigger logic before or after a change to an object state. That's quite important sentence. Callbacks allow you to trigger logic before or after a change to an object state. Let's remember that. And then it goes on at which places of object lifecycle it allows to do it. So callbacks are just a tool, right? But the way it's described will be needed really soon for us. But first, let's see if you have a problem. So my goal is not to convince you to just remove the callbacks all over from your application, right? If they don't cause you a headache, just leave it. There's probably more interesting issues to deal with. But if you have conditional callbacks and they start maybe like this, right? So you do some callback, like maybe an external call, but only if something happened, right? So maybe when an order is completed and status was changed to saved. And maybe in this form that you see, it is acceptable, but unfortunately, from our experience, introducing such patterns to the project quickly grows like a mushrooms after rain in a sunny day, right? It's like, it spreads really fast, and unfortunately it's copy-pasted, right? More often than not, new patterns are not introduced because of the experience or deep thought. They are just copy-pasted, like, and they quickly grow like those mushrooms. And one of the solutions that industry had for this, for callbacks, actually that was more for the FAT model, but how you could use it is to introduce the service object as, or any additional layer, basically, depending on how you call it. I mean, it doesn't really matter, it could be just service. But if you have any additional layer between the controller and the model, then what you could do instead, you could call this callback explicitly after you finish some operation. And if you think about this case, then we are getting the order from the database, then calling the complete method on that order, which in that case throws an exception when it's not possible to complete the order, maybe because there is nothing in the basket. And then the callback is called explicitly. There is only one, but there may be many of them. Problematic callbacks, for example, are sending an email, right? Communication with third party. Third party may fail. What do we do then? We need to compensate this operation somehow. And any other side effects that may occur. If you think about moving these callbacks outside of the model, you may get certain benefits. And that's just the first stage. We'll get to the better stage in the next lesson. And the first one is obviously the explicit code, right? It becomes much easier to understand as you can read code from the top to bottom. Like, yes, I agree, this is procedural code in that case, but this code is doing some kind of business process. And in that case, there is no need to use sophisticated patterns. And the benefit of that is that you exactly know in which order it is going to be executed. You don't have to figure out the order of callback, whether they work as maybe, I don't know, maybe as a database instruments them to do, or maybe they work as they are defined in the file. You know, it's much simpler to learn and to understand the code. If you follow this path, you also reduce the complexity, right? Because you just removed one of the if statement. It is moved from this runtime decision, so the if statement is not evaluated. You just move it explicitly as a step of the algorithm, and you call this step when something exactly has to happen. So you say that when the order is completed, next step is to inform the customer by maybe sending an email or talk to third party and so on. And actually, from the model perspective, from your domain model perspective or your class representing the order model, for example, you're one step closer to unit test because, hey, you just remove some dependencies, right? So you're moving external dependencies outside of the model. So lesson number 2 is to move callbacks to upper layer, but I put a star here. Star means that if you feel that it is problematic, because sometimes you will have some really easy objects that are totally fine to be CRUD and that they just keep some information, maybe like some configuration that doesn't have any additional rules, right? It is completely fine to do it like this. But, you know, let's talk a little bit more about callbacks. Once again, what do they do? And now I'm going back to this definition from the documentation. They trigger logic before or after change to an object state. Okay? Object state changes, they represent some events in your application, right? If you think about this, if you say that, well, the order has been updated to be completed, what really happened? What really happened is that the order, for some reason, was completed, right? Maybe customer paid, maybe something else happened, right? So we have those business events in the system, but they're often simplified to CRUD, right? If you look at this diagram, and if we start with the order that is a draft, and the customer has an intention, so they do the request saying that they want to complete the order, and the order has been completed, in CRUD, it is just an update of the status. But if you would adopt this, this other approach where you actually think in a business events way, you would be closer to event-driven architecture. And now the question is if you're really far from that, because as I said already, the event CRUD introduces some events. The saving data to the database is an event. If we think about the event storming, we could implement it like that. But okay, let's take a look. So if an event is a result of users or system's intention, right? How is the event produced? In CRUD, we change the object state, right? In event-driven architecture, the object produces the event based on the change of the state, and then something publishes this event, maybe to some event bus. In our implementation, it goes to the database, and then it goes to some kind of background worker. And later on, when this event is published to somewhere, maybe in memory bus, maybe some other bus, there may be classes, subscribers that are interested in that events. And when they get this notification that something happened, they will, actually, because not always, it may be also conditional, they will do their logic. So did we just re-implement callbacks in event-driven architecture? A little bit, yes. But this is more like we just describe the, partly the PubSub pattern, right? Which was introduced in 1987. You can read more about this in enterprise integration patterns if you search for PubSub. So when the object state changes, when we think about those publishing events and subscribers, there may be many different reasons to do something in the system, right? And I think it would be hard to get all of those in callbacks because those fat models would become, I don't know, maybe obese. There will be many lines of codes, right? I mean, okay, you could use concerns, but still, it's here. So it's basically the same model. So if you think about this, you could think that, well, if I have many different things interested in some object state changes, which can be represented as an event, maybe I should just leverage this information as this gives me a business value because, for example, I'm closer to the business language. And complexity. So once again, those if statements from callbacks, they will be moved outside of it. That's one benefit, but another thing is that when you think about registering, so you're telling the Rails engine, the Rails configuration that this event should be handled by this event handler. you're actually doing this if statement that you had previously in your callback, right? You are kind of setting it in the configuration. So once again, this moves this complexity somewhere else. For me, it's often easier to understand. And now, when we think about models that get rid of the callbacks, it turns out that those models do less things, right? So instead of maybe not just, but instead of doing completing the order, sending the email, and talking to third party in some external system, they now do only one thing. So they follow the single responsibility principle, right? We moved this logic. We'll talk about different types of logic in one of the next lessons, but we moved this type of logic to something else on the upper layer, right? To the business use case layer that actually knows what are the next steps of the algorithm. And as I mentioned already, others interested in state may react. And now, if you think about this, if we start using events in our application, as I described, so instead of updating the orders, we'll talk about orders being completed and so on, we introduce business-oriented communication language into our code base, right? And from what I observed during my not so long career in Rails, is that Rails developers love business, right? You guys love talking to the business, you love being close to the business, and from my observation in Rails, it's much easier to be close to the business. Why? Because companies are smaller, yet they are not slower. That's surprising, or maybe not, but they're much closer to the business. However, it's not reflected in the code. We speak two different languages, because when we talk to the business, you can actually hear that people use this business language, but the code lives its own crowd way, which sometimes is okay. But lesson number 3 is that business thinks in events, and we should use it to our advantage by utilizing this in the code. Okay, but removing the callbacks was just a first step to deal with models that do too much, right? And once again, it's not that all the fat models are bad. So let's start with a question: when too much is too much? And is the fat model always a problem? And let's look from a perspective of an example. And let's talk about 70 columns in product table. Is that a problem? I don't know. I need more information. I need more context. So I'll give you this context. The context is that this 70 columns are used only to present information about the product, and they are modified only once a month by one person. So is that any problem? No, it's not a problem, right? Okay, so this fat model is, okay, it's probably just a CRUD that is used for displaying purposes. But if you think about 20 columns in product table and stock level, which is one of them, and now if we have this ordering logic that if stock level is modified when an item is added or removed from the basket, and also we have an administrator that updates the stock level, and there is a marketing that works on product description, and it changes often because they are A/B testing and so on. Is that a problem? We have less columns. But yes, this could be a problem when they all three actors together, so the customer, the administrator, and the marketing team, when they try to do something, they may experience lost updates, for example, right? Which leads into inconsistent state, which is not good. Inconsistent state is not good because then you have to somehow fix it, right? You have to find it and you have to make the data right. So one may say, okay, let's use optimistic locking. Well, okay, you could do that, but then people will not be unhappy. Will not be happy because, well, this is not the optimistic situation, right? I mean, a lot of things can go wrong here when we think about so many people using just one database row. So someone might say, okay, so let's. There's also pessimistic locking, right? Yes, but that would create many bottlenecks in the application. So this is not a good idea. Better idea is to actually listen to the narrative that has been there and look at the actors and split the product table. There is probably more than one concept in here. And let's take a look at how we could find those concepts of different yet same product in this case. There are different heuristics. So one of them is the Conway law. Okay, it's not a perfect, but it's a good starter. So if you think about this, you may take a look at what kind of departments you have in your organization and then try to find maybe database columns that could belong to certain departments, right? So we said that, and it also connects with the next question, that we have different actors, and then we said that we have this administrator, marketing actor, right, and the customer actor. So do they care about the same things? Let's think about this. Marketing just wants to update the marketing stuff, and they probably want to increase the sales, right? The customer wants to buy. The administrator wants to take care of the stock level of the product because they need that. That's part of their job, that when they get delivery, they have to put it into the system, right? Okay, so those are two heuristics. Let's go further. Are there any invariants that explain that this data is in the same database? So what is invariant? Invariant is a business rule that shouldn't ever be validated, because if it is, then the system will go into inconsistent state, right? So if we think about this, is it possible that there is some invariant, some business rules that should couple the product name and stock level together? I can't think of any. I mean, it seems like the reason for a change is different in both cases. So obviously the answer is no. So we should probably split it. But once again, only split it when it's a problem. In this case, it is a problem. And well, besides fixing this problem of concurrent access to certain resource, your model just became smaller, and it is once again fulfilling the single responsibility principle in a better way, and it just gained higher cohesion, which is really cool. And now we have a model that works in specific context of some problem, right? We have this stock level problem that we have to manage this. We have some marketing problem and so on. And you know, in 76 year, George Box said that, well, the all models are wrong, but some are useful, right? And if we have just one big product, for example, model in our application, and we see that it is limiting our business growth, maybe we should start from the bottom, and instead of trying some super advanced technical solutions to that, maybe we should start looking from the business perspective, from the modeling perspective, and make this product class smaller and split it into different database tables. Because, and that's lesson number 4, there may be many different models in different bounded contexts. All right. I mentioned in one of the previous lessons that there are different types of logic. And more often than not, fat model that is really large, couple of hundreds of lines of the code, it indicates that there are those different types of logic are mixed. And how could we classify them? One of the classifications would be that there would be more stable type of logic and less stable type of logic. And to give you an example, I prepared two examples. So I will first show both of you to them, and then we will classify them. So if you look at this, we have this rule stating that in order to log into an account, password must be correct. And the other one saying that log the account for 30 minutes and if mail owner if login attempted from new location, right? If you would think about this for just a few seconds, which logic is more stable and which one is less stable? Which one has a chance to change more often? Of course, this one is more stable, right? We want the password to be correct, like always, right? This one is less stable. It may work according to the user's country, to regulations, and so on and so forth, right? It may be different and it may be changed very often. Okay, let's look at the second example. A physical book copy can only be in one place at a time, right? So only one person can get the physical book copy. Other one is that during exam periods, textbooks can only be borrowed for 3 days instead of the usual 2 weeks. So once again, which one is more stable, which one is less stable? Obviously, this one is more stable. It is regulated, kind of regulated by a law of physics, right? This one is less stable. And it's very common, as I mentioned, that those two different types of logic are mixed up. And just to be clear, it's not only the fat models. It also happens in service objects. So if you move your logic out from the fat models to service object, there's this tendency, and I think this is an ugly one, that we just we cannot do something in between, right? We can only have the logic in one place. This is how we work for some reason. And then we move everything to the service object, for example, and then it contains all the logic. And the question is how to deal with it is to actually use service objects or another layer. We can call it business use case layer, application layer. There are different names, but this is the layer that is above this domain logic, right? And it works really great. And it has certain benefits because, first of all, if you separate those logics, it's easier to cover this stable logic by tests. Even you can use mutant coverage here. You can get 100% and make sure that if any unintended change happens, your test will discover that. Besides that, as this logic is reusable, it is easier to introduce new processes, right? And that's a big benefit of introducing the application and business layer together with domain layers from the domain-driven design approach. It lets you build processes based on the stable logic and then just tune those small quirks when you need to do a business process slightly differently. Besides that, well, in my opinion, the system is easier to understand because the logic is categorized. We can see that we have different business use cases that do work on this stable logic, but the business use cases change more often. They are subject to A/B testing and so on. But also logic is segregated. If we do it right, those small quirks that we tune, they can be also very granular and they can be easily tested in form of strategy or politics pattern. So lesson number 5 is to look for stable and less stable logic and separate those. And as I mentioned in the beginning, Rails are good for starting the project, but maintenance is painful. And one of the common allegations against Rails is that they are slow, right? People say they are slow and that the pages load really slow, that we have performance issue and so on. And I find this very unfair because after spending 7 years in .NET, I think that it's not a Rails problem. It is a problem of how our code is structured and the way that we build our applications. But why our applications, and perhaps also Rails applications, why they are slow? The problem is that we only have this one model that we try to use in every possible scenario, in every possible context. And one of the examples is that we have this large data aggregation that we built, and we use many joins here, conditional filtering of something. Then we use some grouping. Then we load this code into Ruby memory. Ideally, if there was n+1. But I just want to tell you one thing. This is not common only to Ruby on Rails, right? So how could we optimize this further if you don't have any more indexes left, right? You cannot put any more indexes, what to do? You have to look at this problem from different angle. So the question that I learned is always worth asking, and I would ask it to the business is how fresh the data has to be. Does it have to be up to date all the time? Or maybe we can have the data that is up to date of a couple of hours, maybe a day, maybe a week, or maybe even in some cases a month, depending on in which business domain we are. And from my observation, the pattern that we usually default to is this large query that you saw on the previous slide. And if the answer is that, we can build the report once couple of hours. We don't need to have fresh data all the time. We may use database mechanism that I think probably all of your databases have, which is materialized view. We could use this materialized view to prepare a cached version of our data. And then, by the way, you should try this. Select is much more faster. It's basically just milliseconds for something that could take up to a couple of seconds previously. The difference, well, you need to build the query to do that. But stay with me, there's a better way. But first of all, another question that I often like to ask is that who needs that report and how often do they need it, right? Perhaps there's a CEO that needs it once a day when they are drinking the morning coffee, right? They like to look at the numbers, how much money was earned. That's really cool. So if this is the case, what could you do? Well, you could be proactive and you could find out that maybe instead of, maintaining this this heavy join query with a lot of filtering, perhaps you could just prepare background job that prepares this report for the CEO, and instead of fighting his anger, just make this report wait for him on his mailbox each morning, because you know that he's drinking the coffee at 9 a.m., right? We need to start asking business questions because they often lead us to better solutions. If we get more input, if we get more data, and we know that, well, maybe we don't need to have super quick page refreshing, right? Maybe we just need to prepare it once a day and send it to whoever needs that. And maybe sometimes if we need to refresh those pages and we need fast responses, perhaps we should build dedicated read models for those pages, for those views. And such read model can be built in many different ways. One way is to insert into more than one table at the time. For example, if you know that you need to, calculate some financial report, right? And you know that there's a lot of data, it fetches data from a lot of sources. Perhaps those sources, instead of having just one insert to this source of truth column, source of truth table, could insert the data into the other one, which is just, disposable, just a read model that you can always delete and recalculate that and insert it again. You could also use data-based triggers for that, but what we use is, once again, event-driven architecture with the CQRS. And if you do that right, then when you need to display the data, you can just do select star from marketing report for CEO, and it is lightning quick because this data doesn't need any more joins. We do that whenever we prepare the model, right? So when some event occurs and we know that we need to build this read model, we will do some insert here. And now it depends, sometimes it will be synchronously, sometimes asynchronously, but we will prepare this read model upfront. So whenever somebody needs it, there is less pressure during reading. There is no complex joins with filtering and so on that takes a lot of time. And the data is displayed much, much quicker. It's a little bit like a cache, but it's not a cache. It's something different, right? It's maintained a little bit differently, and you can also test that easily building those read models and so on. And now someone may say that, well, you have two sources of true, which is also not good. Yes and no. I mean, we are making this data replication, right? But we know that there is only one source of truth and that there is one, well, now it depends if it's entity, or in our case, it's most likely the event store that keeps this stream of facts that actually make they are the answer of what is the actual state of this entity or just of the thing in the system, basically. And someone might also say that, well, when you duplicate this data, then you have large databases. And guess what? This storage is cheap, right, since a couple of years. And if it grows too much, we can once again go with the business questions and try to find out which data needs to be accessed as the hot data and which data can be cold data and maybe move to some other data storage, right? So lesson number 6 is question the one and only way of building data and building pages on the fly with joins. and ask better questions to find better solutions. Another thing that I would like to discuss is the code structure. And someone asks, oh, dude, what do you have against the code structure right now? Nothing. I mean, just initial code structure is great, right? It's great for starting. Models go to models, jobs go to jobs. I don't know where to put it. It goes to the services, right? It's very typical. But when the project is mature and it becomes harder to navigate because only navigation I have is the models, and you might not care about that, but most likely you don't work solo. And if you follow this structure for too long and there's just 2, 3 or 4 catalogs and everything goes inside of them, then onboarding new people, for example, may be hard. It may become quite harder. And it may be a good thing if you are planning to stay in this company and you want to be this buzz factor, right? But that's not how we should do our job. So what's the alternative? And I want to just give you a new tool into your toolbox. I want to show you a different way. And this different way is called screaming architecture. Why is this screaming? Well, it is screaming because it is basically screaming this code structure to you, and it is telling you where you can look for certain business use cases. And as you can see, we can refactor this traditional array structure into this screaming architecture. And for example, we could have this domain catalog within a booking module, with different use cases such as create booking, cancel booking, and modify booking, right? So now if I need to look something booking related, I know I have to go into bookings, and then I know what kind of use cases this system can do. And what are those use cases? Those are these process and process level logic organizers, like it's sometimes called services, application layer, and often also use cases. So lesson number 7 is that there is a new tool in your toolbox. You have just been made aware of screaming architecture. I hope that you run into this problem and that you will need it sometime soon, because that means that your project is large and it is successful. All right, so the topic that couldn't be skipped in webinar at the end of 2024. AI. So AI changed the way we live, right? Like it's mostly visible since beginning of this year. Pace has skyrocketed. There was ChatGPT, now there is, I can't even count how many of different LLMs. And one question that's often asked is, will AI replace me? So let's take a look if this is possible and if this will happen. So AI can be a great programming partner, right? It can speed you up a lot. It writes the implementation, it writes tests, it explains the code. It explains the code both in the chat, but also with the comments. Then you copy those comments in your code base, so you remember those explains, right? That's really cool. I wouldn't copy that comments. You can always prompt him to not write those comments. All right, but when the AI generates the code, I think you should at least read it, right? And I hope that you do that. But I have also a couple of rule of thumbs that I follow whenever I work with AI, because I use it. It really indeed makes me faster, and I want to have the skill of using both Copilot and other LLMs to develop solutions quicker. But the problem with AI is that it has those hallucinations, and it lies without an eye blink, and it's even if it's uncertain, well, we cannot say that algorithm can be uncertain, right? But if the AI doesn't have the answer in the algorithm, it will just look for something closest, right? And it wouldn't be bad if people validated the answers. But you probably saw in social media the guy that was first complaining about Camel, and then he found out, and I'm really glad that he shared this story, by the way, that his server was actually hacked, and it almost got his Hetzner account blocked. And what was the reason? And once again, I'm really happy that he shared that, is that the reason was that the script misconfigured Docker to listen on port 2375 without TLS. And he was not familiar enough with Docker to know that this port was explicitly authenticated. So you know the rest of the story, right? And the point is not to make fun of this person. The point is to learn from his story, and the point is that the AI allows us to go much quicker. I mean, sometimes I'm really surprised how much of the things that I couldn't even do, such as I don't know, decent UI design, right? I'm not really good at that, but I can just give some screenshot of the page to the AI and it will do something similar, right? But so that's what I have in mind, that we can do things that we couldn't do before and we can do them much faster, right? And it is great. But my rules of thumb when using AI in programming, right? If the AI generated my implementation, well, I make sure I read it, and it's my responsibility to write a test if I didn't do that before writing or generating this implementation, right? If I'm generating infra code and I have no idea what I'm doing, of course, I can check with the AI, but then I will confirm with documentation to actually make sure that I don't make this port mistake, right? Because this is not just a random number that the AI generated. It may have a meaning, especially when you think about the ports, right? So, and as a bonus, remember to craft your prompt carefully. The more information you provide to AI, the better result you will get. It's actually good to tell the AI that I even tried once to argue with AI as DHH about the callbacks and so on. It's fun, you should try that. So, lesson number 8, use AI, but do it wisely. Don't turn off your thinking. It is still our responsibility. And guess what? When you make a Git commit and you push the code to the server, you're the one that is signing this off, right? The fact that AI generated wrong answer, nobody will care. So, AI trends show us how important the data is. And when it comes to the data, sometimes more important than what it is how we got there, right? And I already talked about keeping about events and how we keep the data in our regular CRUD approach, and the way that we keep them is just having some status, right? For example, and we don't know how this happened. Someone may say that you may be using paper trail and you actually know what was the history, but try to compare it with event sourcing and use this approach. I think you'll never go back, because this approach gives you, well, first of all, it's an industry standard, right? And it gives you this sequence of events that leads you to the current state of the object that you can also replay for many different reasons, do some data simulations, right? And well, there are many other things like rebuilding grid models. But what I really like is that it allows you to make data-driven decisions, right? And there is a story behind it, which I'll tell you in just a moment. But also, it gives you this immutable log that you have in your application, or actually in your database, that you can always say and take it as a proof that something happened in a specific way. When it comes to debugging with event sourcing, it's much easier to discover what's going on in the app, right? If there is maybe some process hanging and you are using event sourcing to also in your processes, or perhaps there is this bug in the data, right? You would know from which state it was able to transition to the current state, which is not good. And you know where you can take it back. Because if the new number is incorrect, you at least know the previous number that was correct, and you can maybe avoid this. With the CRUD-based approach, when you just update the recent value in the column, it is not possible. It also gives you the context when analyzing data. And I cannot emphasize how much it seems to be important when we have this new era of AIs and so much uncertainty. But what is also cool, we could just export this data, and you no more need to hire the data analytics. AI can help really much here. And what I already mentioned, but what really makes the difference for me is that it is possible for us developers to create reports from historical data. And I believe if you guys work more than 5 years in industry, you probably had a situation in which business came to you and asked for some report, and you said that, yeah, but we never kept this information, right? And then people try to build some strange solutions to with temporal tables, for example, to keep this data for the future. But if you have events in your application, it is and events are a first-class citizen, then you're able to do that really easily. You can rebuild those reports, and if you don't have them, maybe it's time to start considering this approach, because as I mentioned, Rails devs are close to business, and also event sourcing is the thing that enables this business language in the code base, right? So instead of just having it on the one level, consider to moving it to the different level to take your code to the next level. Many levels has been set. Okay. And now it's a story time, because as I mentioned, there is this possibility to analyze the data. And the fact that you have this data may be useful. We had one of the clients that had this algorithm of categorizing, let's say, the cat pictures, right? So there was a categorization algorithm, and there was an automatic one for simplicity and manual one, right? Automatic one couldn't ever override the manual one. The other way around, it was possible, right? So there was some kind of hierarchy that was also implemented as the domain model. And there was a couple of cases in which we noticed that, and customers complained that they have to recategorize the cat pictures from something, always from the same value to the other one that they like. For some reason, our algorithm was not learning that. Maybe it wasn't fitted well. But the thing is that when you had this data that customers most often recategorize from category A to different category manually, this is actually a great input, great feedback for our categorization algorithm, right? So we can use it. And we can also generate a report and see which cat pictures are categorized wrong mostly, right? Because you can see that if it was categorized a few times automatically and then it's changed manually, then you have this idea, right? And you can count that because you have the events on each of cat picture and when it was categorized. So what we did, actually, we used this data to find out the mapping between the correct category that was set manually with the type of cat pictures that we could use. And some of you may be scared of event sourcing. I was on that train as well, because I didn't really want to learn to manage a new database. But the point is that event sourcing doesn't require additional database. You can build it on top of database that you have using Rails Event Store, for example. So it works with Postgres, MySQL, SQLite. It doesn't work with Mongo, but if you're using Mongo, I cannot really help you. So the lesson number 9 is stop losing data. And I want to tell you one last story before going to Q&A. And we had one of the consulting gig in which we were asked to find out why the application is dying every couple of hours. The problem was there was no observability, so we installed one, and we detected many possible reasons. Some of them confirmed the static analysis of the code, because sometimes you just look at the view and you know that there is some n+1s and unnecessary eager loading and so on and so forth. But without observability, it wouldn't be possible to discover what we discovered. So the problem was there was, maybe not a problem, but the situation was that there was many bots crawling this application, right? And I was surprised how many new bots are in the game. There was these, each LLM most likely has some kind of new bot introduced that scrubs the pages. But one of the bots was very unpleasant and it didn't follow the scrapping etiquette, right? And it turned out that this very rude bot caused 98% of the traffic. when we discovered that, to validate the hypothesis that this guy is causing the troubles, we turned it off in robots takes that, and these incidents stopped happening. And we could probably stop here, but we started asking a question. We started thinking if business is fine with taking it off, because it's 2024, almost 2025, and people don't do the e-commerce shopping anymore by going to Google. Now they ask LLM, right? So there are consequences. But okay, let's leave those consequences. We know how this would go. We would just ask a couple of questions to try to find out how to deal with that. But the question is, was that a true root cause? And going deeper into this observability, we discovered that the product catalog page was just super slow, and many requests started queuing on database. And such issues are close to impossible to detect without observability. Even with observability, it is hard. I think it's more and more important to have it set correctly for your application, because times changes. As I told you, I was surprised that there is so many bots that crawl the application. So this uncertainty is rising. We are actually getting the new stressors from all over the internet, right? Like, think about this. People that wouldn't be able to write a line of the code right now can build, probably simple, but still, they can build systems, right? So observability in the next year, in the next following years, will be more and more important. Therefore, the lesson number 10 is to invest in it so you don't get surprised about things happening in your application, and you will not be surprised in the behaviors of your product. And to make some short summary, I'll move myself out of here. Make your test suite fast. Move callbacks to upper layer if they become a problem, because remember, everything needs to be analyzed in certain context. Business thinks in events, use it to your advantage. There may be many different models in different bounded contexts. Look for stable and less stable logic and separate those. Question the one and only way of doing anything, but in this case, of building data on fly with joins. Ask questions to find better solutions. And the another thing is the new tool that you learned, screaming architecture, that may be helpful if you feel that your code could benefit from being structured in another way. Use AI, but do it wisely. Don't turn off your thinking. Stop losing data and invest in observability so you don't get surprised and you have enough data whenever you need to find out what's going on in your application. And there is bonus lesson number 11. I tried to emphasize that a couple of times, but the things that we talked about, I'm not trying to encourage you to just, go to your job tomorrow or today if you're in different time zone and now start doing things completely differently. Maybe besides asking business questions, because that's always useful. But when it comes to event sourcing or separating the different levels of business logic, you have to do it slowly. You rather try to do evolution in your project. Don't do revolution, because revolutions are bloody and they usually don't end well. Take small steps, try to convince your team, and remember, it always takes time. And now back to the question that we started with. Is Ruby on Rails still a good choice for 2025? Besides having a hot wire and awesome syntax thanks to Ruby, I don't see Ruby on Rails being any worse than different programming languages. I believe that we can build products that empower organizations and not limit their business capabilities, but we do that using the same techniques that also other programming worlds use, which is, for example, having the elastic architecture and code easy to modify, and having more business-oriented approach. You as a developer, you can do that on your own, and then the good behaviors will spread over the team if people see this valuable. And we'll do the Q&A in a couple of minutes. But first, if what I shared today for you, you feel that it inspired you and you want to get out of this comfort zone, you're interested in learning domain-driven design, you would like to go deeper in those topics, maybe learn some event-driven architecture, event sourcing, or maybe even event storming, and discovering those business problems and bounded context. Of course, you can read one of those books, all of them. I highly recommend the red books, so the one from the Implementing Domain-Driven Design and Patterns, Principles, and Practices of Domain-Driven Design. They're really great for the starters. Learning domain-driven design is also good. The blue book, it's a little bit hard for the beginning. I rather encourage you to start with the other ones. You can also learn from our blog. It's for free. You can see there are different tags. There's one for domain-driven design. There's one for event sourcing. This is the blog address. I believe you know it already. There is also this YouTube channel that we have. And there's many videos, but don't be fooled by this categorization. We have a couple of new videos recorded this year, but just me and Tomek, we are kind of, we didn't mature enough to categorize them into those categories that we have in our homepage, but we'll do that at some point. To be honest, I just discovered it today. However, you can then experiment, build and test the techniques on some test projects, pet projects, however you call them, make mistakes that people usually make at the beginning. For example, making too large aggregates, wondering when they need to start snapshotting the events in the event streams or putting blobs into aggregates. That's not a good idea, by the way. Or if you're interested in going deeper in those techniques, you can join our online workshop on November 14. The agenda is as follows. We will introduce you to events and how you can actually introduce events into your application. You'll learn how to build read models, understand problems using event storming technique. We will be working on Canvas. You will learn how you can find bounded context, so those different contexts for your application in which the words may have different meaning and they may have different reason to exist. You will learn how to go step by step from large active record class to something smaller, to domain-oriented classes. You will also design aggregates and event source aggregates. You will turn business logic with tune business logic with policies. So if you feel that there are if statements that maybe are not very stable and they sometimes need a little bit of tweaking, I'll show you how to do that. And also you'll learn process managers. So if you're getting lost in the async world, in the background jobs work, this pattern may be very helpful. And of course, there will be place to discuss problems from your project and ask questions how you can use this to make your project better, to make your business people more happy, and hopefully to make yourself a better developer. What's in for you? As I said, we'll discuss domain-driven design, event-driven architecture together with event sourcing. It will be step-by-step guided on prepared example. We'll solve real-world problem. We'll focus on the problem that I mentioned today in this presentation. So we'll focus on these different actors trying to access the same resource in the one database table, and we will be splitting that. And we'll go beyond aggregates because for me, domain-driven design, it's not about only those tactical tools or patterns that I can code. It's also all of those things that happen outside of the code and all of those things that I can do without writing any production code to discover new business concepts, ask better questions, and get more business knowledge. And we'll work on a broken version of Rails Event Store e-commerce GitHub repository. Maybe some of you know this already. So I spent some time to, it's not reverse engineer, but to under-engineer it, make it really bad place, but really good as an exercise to refactor. And it's a hands-on workshop. There will be a lot of coding. And now, if that sounds interesting, the workshop price is normally $359. But I don't know, Andrzej Krzywda got crazy today, and he told me that until the end of this month, you can buy it for $200. But that's not it. There is more. There is more because there we have some products that may also make you a better Rails developer. And there is this Fearless Refactoring Rails Controllers, really great ebook that will help you and will guide you how you can actually work with the Rails controllers, how to make them smaller, put them on a diet, which normally cost $49. And there is this one, domain-driven Rails, that you can use, the ebook that presents the DDD, CQRS, and event sourcing together with exercises. This is $69, but I'm not really good with math, so I added it up, the books, to $100 together with workshop. It's $459, but after discount, only until the end of the month, it's $259. I don't know, this guy, I mean, it's bargain to me, but hey, still. So if that sounds interesting and you would like to join us and do some learning with like-minded Rails developers, learn together, discuss together, make new friends, you can go to this webpage, productsarkency.com / from legacy to DDR, which stands from domain-driven Rails. I'll put the link in the chat as well. You can also scan the QR code. It's not a hack. So if you're interested, you can join. But there is one thing. There is only 14 slots. And there is only 14 slots because, well, it's hard to do a good workshop, valuable workshop for people and make them learn. I sometimes have work as a trainer, as I mentioned in the beginning. So in my experience, group of 14 people for 6 hours on one day, it's a really good place. I mean, it's a really good amount of people that makes learning easier and that lets experience sharing and so on, and even pair programming. But before you do anything, just please wait, because I don't want just random people on this workshop. So I'll tell you who this workshop is for. It is for Rails developers that want to expand Toolkit beyond the Rails way. It is for Rails developers that want to go beyond CRUD, that feel that this CRUD is limiting them and that they cannot achieve and they cannot build the products that they would love to build. It's also for people that want to learn event sourcing to build auditable, reliable audit logs, and for people that from event sourcing would like to jump also into event-driven architecture to emphasize and to introduce this business language into their code bases. It's also for people ready to break the fat models and change some callbacks into publish subscriber pattern, maybe slim some, do some refactoring and change the way you think. But more important for me than who should join is that who shouldn't join. And if you are a silver bullet seeker or you want to work with a CRUD, please don't come, don't waste your time. If you're looking for one to rule them all, pattern, solution, whatever, I mean, no, I will not give you that. A lot of discussions will start with it depends, and then we'll explore different topics based on the business needs and so on and so forth. So if you are looking for this silver bullet or golden hammer, you will not get that there. Don't waste your money. If you believe that the framework must be used in a one only way, so if you think that if you work in Rails, you must do the Rails way, it's not for you. Rails is a great framework, but I believe that you can use it in many different ways, and there is more than the Rails way, which isn't bad either. It's a good in certain context. So if you're interested, you can join me. I will do everything that you will, so you can extend your toolbox, right, to add new tools, and that you will start a new year with new experience, with some bright view, some fresh view on the problems. And the best part of it is that it may not even require much code changes from you or just to do any revolution in the code. It doesn't mean that you will have to introduce aggregates right away and so on and so forth, right? It means that, first of all, you will start looking at the problems from different perspective, and then maybe the first step will be introducing some materialized view, because you have a report that is only displayed once a month. Maybe you will do some different things like sending the emails, the things that we talked about today, right? It's all about changing the mindset. There are those aggregates. Events are useful. As I mentioned, it allows you to make data-driven decisions and so on. So yeah, consider that. If this is interesting for you, I've put the link in the chat. I'll do that once again. So if someone joined us right now, you may be interested. There is the QR code, and the price is valid up until the end of this month. And as I mentioned, we only have 14 slots. All right, so it's time for Q&A. And I can see that there is one question. Carolina asked is it possible to introduce streaming architecture in existing large code base? Is it worth it? As I mentioned, it is important to think about solving those problems by doing evolution, right? So if you have a module that you know that is that you discover that is a certain bounded context, and you can see that you could actually take it out, take it somewhere next to your current structure and benefit from that, I think it's totally worth it, because it will be the first small step and you'll discover how to do that. And this will let you, in the long run, build your application differently and solve this navigation problem. And I think this is especially valuable in large code bases. Just remember to do it slowly and make sure that you convince your team and that you're all on the same page, because otherwise those changes will be hard to introduce. There are also questions that I noticed. Thanks, Pavel, for answering. Yes, this is recorded and it will be available for 48 hours. Can you recommend a to-do app implemented in Rails with the Rails Event Store gem? I would like to explore examples to better understand how it can be applied in real projects. Yes, so there are... so there is the e-commerce app. I don't know if you know that one, Krzysztof. I'll put the link in just a second. It's built on top of Rails Event Store. And you can find it in here, posting a comment. And it's built on top of Rails Event Store. You can see how this gem is used. You can see how the aggregates are built, how the process managers are built, and how the events are utilized. And also, together with Tomek Stolarczyk, we recorded a series of, I mean, it wasn't really serious because there was too spontaneous for a series, but couple of videos where we present how you can utilize events. I'll send you a link to one of the videos. For example, you can take a look at this one. It's about the read models and how we build them. And this episode is, so it's about how you can deal with read models that have events that are concurrently published. It also contains a test, so it shows you how you can test those things. We discuss different techniques in here, how you can actually deal with problems that, deal with challenges that you introduce when you, for example, do the async processing of events. You can also find more videos about the aggregates, designing aggregates, and how we go from the code diagram in MyRobot into the code implemented with event sourcing and aggregates in mind. Also, the project that we are using in those videos is available under this link. Just one second. So there is this task app actually, but it also contains some. It shows how you can build different reports based on events from past, for example, how you can fetch data that you're missing whenever you are rebuilding something from events, right? Because there will be cases in which you'll have events for column A, B, C, D that you need, and you can fetch this data from events, but there may be one of the columns, for example, the username, that you don't really find valuable to have an event for that. So you don't build it in the, for example, async read model, or just a read model builder. So what you could do, we show in one of the episodes how you can fetch this missing data just directly from the table, because this is okay. We need to be pragmatic at most. And also, one of the things, in most of the videos actually, we do show tests to our code solutions. So if we think about some solutions, we usually start with a test to show that something doesn't work, and then how we can fix it. It's really funny with the concurrency tests. Love writing them, unless sometimes it doesn't work as intended. Then that's fun. All right, are there any other questions? If you're looking for something else that I didn't mention in the agenda, then let me know. I'm not really best in writing agendas. So if you're wondering if this workshop is for you, you can contact me at dev@arkency.com. And then I'll help you decide if this is something that is valuable for you, or perhaps it's not the right time for you to join because you may not, I may not talk about what you're looking for. What are problems with event-driven architecture and event sourcing? Most common ones. So with event sourcing, one that is, there are different aspects. One of the problem that people have is that people in the beginning, they are not sure where to link the events into which streams, right? Because even in event sourcing, we have this concept of streams, which is this logical representation of events. And when people start, they are not sure into which stream to assign the certain events. And that's one of the aspects, one of the problem. Another problem is that when people start, they tend to build streams that are too long, which may then result in performance issues, and then people start looking for snapshots, which in my opinion is not really a good approach. In my opinion, what you should do instead is to try to find a business concept that lets you make this snapshot shorter. When it comes to event-driven architecture, I think that one of the issues that's the most common is that people forget that events may come out of order, or that they may arrive more than once, for example, right? Because in most implementations, I think there is at least once delivery, right? So it means that you can get events to your subscriber more than once, and you need to be prepared for that. There is this concept of idempotency that you should implement in your event handlers to make them handle this situation, right? I think we also have video on that. Another question is that, does event sourcing require a specialized database? No, it doesn't. I think there was one slide about that. If I go back, second, but basically no. There is this event store DB that you could use, but there's a lot of things that we need to care about. In Rails, we have the Rails event store, which is an event store that runs on top of Postgres, SQLite, and MySQL. So if you use that, there are scripts that prepare the events and event streams events column, especially the data and metadata columns are responsible for keeping your data in JSONB, right? You can read more about this in the documentation, or also you can refer to the YouTube channel. We have the video, and that was one of the first ones, so this should be easy to find. And this is one video where my camera didn't work well, but you can take a look at this, and we explain how the data is stored in your regular relational database that you're most likely using in your Rails application. All right. In an application using domain-driven design and event sourcing, how can we handle a change in a person's identification document while ensuring that the unique number for school enrollment remains consistent as a business rule? Okay, let me think about that. Okay, so you're looking, okay, so I'll need some clarification for you. Let me ask you a question. So you mean that, for example, you are changing some ID document of a person, and you want to make sure that it's unique in the system, in the entire system, that there is no another person with such ID. Is that correct? If this is correct, then you can rely on expected version and streams. So in that scenario, you would create a dedicated stream. Okay, not really. Then I don't get the question. Okay, so I'll finish my thought. So in business rule, the identification is unique, but later it might change. Okay. So is it something similar to having an email that is unique in the application? Or is it totally different case? Yes. Yes, exactly. So if it's similar to email, yes. So as I mentioned, first of all, if it has to be unique, and it has to be unique during creation, you ensure that there is no such a stream in the system already. And if you want to change this identification for some reason, then and if you want to keep the history of this person, then what you would normally do, you would once again create a new stream and then migrate the events to this stream, also including that the person name has changed. That's one strategy. Or what you could do as well is to just start a new stream and just put this migration event into the beginning of that stream that would indicate that the knowledge that the person has been kind of, that the ID has changed, right? So you would know that the beginning of the stream would tell you explicitly the information that this seems like it's a new stream, but previously you can link into this person's history by going to the other stream. There are two strategies how you could do that. So you could either migrate, or you could just do this migration event, the identification changed event, and then make it sure that it exists in the new stream that represents the new identification. That's how I would do that. One of the ways. I think most likely after rethinking that, I would do the second one. I wouldn't migrate the events. I would just make sure that I know where the connection is. That's a very interesting case, by the way. So is there anyone that uses Rails Event Store in the applications, in your application, or have you used that? I'm not sure if there's some delay. Okay, so is there any other questions? If no, then I will thank you for participation in this webinar. Really glad to have you here, guys. And I hope you learned something interesting. Oh, that's cool, Jar. If you want to, you can give us a shot on dev.arkency.com I've put it over here in the comment section. If you have any problems, happy to help. But yeah, so I hope that you learned something useful from this webinar. If you have any questions, you can mail me, as I mentioned. If you are somewhere in between, wondering if you should join the workshops, let me know. Or if the date doesn't work for you, maybe we'll gather another group. Let's stay in touch. And thank you for watching. Have a good evening. And once again, thank you for spending this evening with me. Ciao.